Hello, welcome to Inspiring Women with ADHD. I'm Renee Allen, the host of this podcast. Happy to be here today. And I thought I might talk to you today about just the basics of ADHD, what common symptoms are, the criteria for diagnosis, whether you just seek to get diagnosed or not. But it just seems like there are still a lot of women who say, maybe I have ADHD, or like I was before I knew I had ADHD. I had no idea what the symptoms were. So I thought I'd just kind of go through a review of that. If you already know it, I'm also going to give some history on what it used to be called over the years. Over my lifetime, I look back and think, if you were wondering why was I not diagnosed as a child? When you hear the timeline, you might see your date in there of when you were going to school, when you were in college, when you were in high school or whatever, and see, oh, they really didn't know very much about this at all. And even more recently, for those of you more like my kids' age who are young adults, still it was seen as something much different as what it's understood to be now. And it's just super interesting to learn about because we hear different words like ADD or ADHD, or even with autism, you would hear Asperger's and then you don't hear Asperger's. And or people still say that, but it's not a diagnosis anymore. Why is that? So I get curious about these things. It's one of my rabbit holes that I go down to learn about. And I thought I'd share that with you. And uh, autism, although it's different than ADHD, it is a neurodivergence. And there are a lot of people who have both autism and ADHD, and they call them ADHD. It's not an official diagnosis, but that's a name for having both of them. And that's interesting for me. I'll just give you a little bit of information on that too. But let's start with ADHD and what the DSM-5 is. So the DSM is the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. So that's DSM. I always remember diagnostic and manual, and then I get confused on the S. It's statistical. So I'm gonna, now that I'm seeing it written and I'm saying it over and over, it might help me. But there's more. There's an M and a D. So just think like a doctor, MD. But the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. And there are a lot. I did an episode quite a while ago about the different categories for mental disorders, and I know there's been a lot of growth with it over the years of, um, reducing that stigma of, "Oh, that person's mental," or, "Oh, that person has mental problems," or whatever. Yeah, a lot of us do, and we don't say that when we're talking about, "Oh, that person has a problem with her arm. She broke her arm," or, "That person doesn't have doesn't is having problems with their stomach or something, has digestive problems." And some things are developed physical problems that we have are developed in life, like an accident, an injury. Sometimes we're born with certain problems in our bodies, a heart defect or different things that we have throughout our lives. And the same can be said for mental disorders. They can be things that develop while you're alive, and they can be things that you're born with. ADHD is one of the ones that you're born with. It's a neurodevelopmental disorder. And it's not like I'm the biggest expert on this at all. I'm not a doctor or anything. But when I see people make claims like, basically, your ADHD won't be a problem if you do these things, if you exercise, if you eat better, if you just did this, if you just did that, meaning like lifestyle things or efforts that we put into it. And I'm of the belief that we still have symptoms. We can have symptoms get more intense or less intense. We can have medication or what's it called? Supplements. I wanted to say substance, like substance abuse, not substance abuse. Supplements. We can take supplements. We can take different things. We can play with different options and see what works for us. And I know just like any other system that I develop in my life or medication that works for a while, over time, it might not work anymore, or because of life changes, especially as women, we have so many hormonal changes, whether it's month to month or perimenopause, menopause, after having a baby, while you're pregnant, so many hormonal changes that even that can change how your symptoms show up. Stress in your life can change how symptoms show up. So that's one thing that I like to bring with my expertise is the understanding of calming the nervous system. Nervous system regulation is the name for it, but I don't know, it's not a pretty name, so I like calming the nervous system, helping your body get rid of stress that comes in, and learning how to be to almost put up a shield so that the stress doesn't get absorbed, or when you see it getting absorbed in your body, what do you do? Because it can be troubling for your body physically, but also mentally. So mental disorders, it's okay to have a mental disorder. Doesn't mean that everything's all rosy and wonderful, but it doesn't mean there's something wrong with you. It just means that you are different than the norm of how the brain functions for most people or how the brain, I guess, was designed to function. So that's all my take on it. And it's interesting because whenever I look into building my Instagram page or whatever those things are, my website, they always wanna know, what is the value of your company? What is the value of your business? What is it that you want to bring forth? And I've always had in mind the thing that I wanna do more than anything is help people understand how amazing they are. And you can't really put that on an Instagram page. I mean, I guess you can, but, it's like, SEO keywords, are people gonna be able to find it if you say things like that? But there's other things I wanna teach. There's different methods, there's different skills, there's different tools or systems that you can develop or things that you can learn about that help you figure out what to do best for you with ADHD. But if I had to tack another value, I mean, I guess the value isn't really I want people, that's more my mission statement of the reason I do this is because I care for people, even people I don't know. I care for humans. I have so much compassion and empathy for people that I want them to feel amazing. We started watching baseball. I love the Dodgers. So if anybody's not a Dodgers fan, please don't 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 see me as like we all like different teams, right? And some may love the Dodgers too. But I have a hard time, not just I mean, you want your team to win and stuff, but just even watching the game last night, the pitchers that Arizona had first was doing really, really well, and the Dodgers were behind. And then at some point, that a lot of times a pitcher cannot pitch a whole game unless like Yamamoto almost did last year. But I digress on that. But, I honestly, I didn't used to be this big into sports. I have 4 brothers, and they were so into sports and watched things all the time. I used to listen to them talk about baseball cards and stuff, and I went to Giants games growing up. We lived near well, not near, like 3 hours from San Francisco, but near enough for us. And never did I ever think that I'd become this big baseball fan. But anyway, back to watching the game last night when they brought in another pitcher within an inning, the Dodgers got maybe it was an inning and a half. I'm really not good with numbers, but I'm good with feelings. And and Will Smith got a home run on his birthday, 2 strikes and 3 balls, and he got a home run, which brought the Dodgers ahead, but I felt so bad for the Arizona pitcher when he left the mound and they put in another pitcher. Because I want people to feel good about how they do. I want them to not feel like, "I let my whole team down, we could have won." All of that. That's the only struggle I have with watching sports is my compassion for the people, or when I watch football, when they get injured, even basketball, I just have a hard time watching them get injured because I just think, "Oh my goodness, that must hurt so much." But anyway, back to this. So yeah, so just that's my value that I wanna bring to you, or something that I wanna teach along with what I share is that and what was my point? Is that we're not necessarily curable. We can help our condition. We can help our situation. I am not somebody who thinks, "Oh, no, I have ADHD. You have ADHD. There's no hope. We're never gonna be able to accomplish what other people do, and you're never gonna be able to accomplish what you wanna do." I am a very optimistic person. At the same time, well, I would say I have more doses of optimism more than realism, but I'm also realistic in the fact that I don't like the idea of making a promise or telling somebody that once you do this, then everything will be better forever. I think it's always gonna take effort. It's gonna be like going on a run or something. You don't keep running by not putting in the effort. And there are so many things that you can do to make your day more effortless, setting up these systems, making your life flow in a way that works so much better, that real life happens, situations come up that change your schedule, your system, and setting yourself up for success is the best thing you can do, but it doesn't mean things will be perfect all the time. And everything that we do, it's we just have to have that in mind to not think, "Oh, no, I'm not doing it right. I thought I was doing so well. I was being so consistent," and not to get down on yourself because even if you did everything, quote unquote, right all the time to manage your life, to put yourself in a situation where your life would go as well as it could, there are things that happen, like even hormonally or just you go on a trip and you come back and there's different reasons that our brains get maxed out and our brain doesn't function as well when it's maxed out. So that's we set up systems and things at home is so that our brain doesn't have to work on that overload way. But all that being said, I'm just coming back to this DSM-5, this Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Illnesses, and or you could say a mental uh, reference book on brain-related conditions and mental health conditions. So, um, So why does one so this is from the Cleveland Clinic, which has a ton of information on ADHD, a lot of articles. It also has some ads, not as many as some, but it's crazy. I was looking on a website last night, went onto Facebook this morning, and an ad came up for that website, and it kind of bothered me because how does Facebook know? How does Facebook know? So I clicked on not interested in this anymore because I thought, how dare you? Anyway, okay. So the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. I just said that conflict was at the top. It said mental illnesses, but it's mental disorders. Okay. So when they update it, they change the number or they might add some numbers to it. But I'm going to give you just going back to when ADHD was talked about, what the timeline is and what names that you may have heard of before. And this is fascinating to me. So I was born in the 60s. The first issue of the diagnostic, and I'm just going to say DSM, was in 1952. So that was before I was born. And it listed all the mental disorders that were recognized at the time. Not nearly as many were recognized. Does that mean they didn't exist? Probably not. But who knows, you know? So it talked about the causes, the risk factors, treatments. They did not recognize ADHD. So ADHD is what we call it today. We've been calling it for a long time, even though some people still say ADD. They didn't recognize the APA is the let me go back. I'm thinking it's like the American, my guess is psychiatric. Yep, American Psychiatric Association. So they formally recognized ADHD as a mental disorder in the 1960s. So let me go back. In 1902, British pediatrician Saint Sir George Frederick Still described what he said an abnormal defect, that's not very nice, of moral control in children. And he found that some children who were affected by this could not control their behavior the same way a typical child is, but they were still intelligent. And this is fascinating because this is in 1902, and now we say neurodivergent or neurotypical, right? So he found that some children were not typical in how they can control their behavior. And I don't know if you've ever talked to friends, like if you have children or their children are grown, but I have children who were more, running around or talking out loud when they shouldn't be talking out loud or something. And you look at another child and they don't have any problem doing it. Even at Disney World a year or so ago, I was, I was with my daughter-in-law and her 3 kids at the time. It was probably a couple years ago. And, it was the kind of thing like where we had to have a system down so we wouldn't lose any children because they were all very hyper. One diagnosed with ADHD. I would say eventually 2 will be of those 3, and now there's a 4th baby, so who knows if he will be. But, very, very, very hyperactive, impulsive, all these things. And I saw a family that had a child the same age just standing there, not even in the stroller, like, "Hey, get in the stroller, I'm strapping him in," or something with my grandson, but or holding on their hand or whatever it is, just constantly making sure that we don't lose them. And I mean, not that it was super stressful, but it was something that was mindful. And even my kids, I just remember the day when my youngest son, we were at a barbecue, and I thought, the day will come that I'm not going to have to worry about having a child that runs out to the street. The day will come that I won't have to, because that was something I dealt with a lot from my kids who bolted, who had impulse control, who had a lot of energy that wanted to run, weren't really looking to where they were running. And so this is in 1902 that a pediatrician in it says Britain, I don't know if it was England, but um, he recognized that some children could not control their behavior. And that I think is wonderful because even now, today I was at church and I have a friend who has a son. I'm pretty sure it was probably her son. I didn't turn to look because when someone's child makes noise and then everyone turns to look, that can't feel good as a parent. And her son is disabled, both physically and has autism. And he was making noise, and most of us are used to that. I mean, I would say the majority of us are used to it, but there was an older woman, and I say older, I'm older too, but she was older than me, and she was to my right, and I kinda tune out kids' sounds a lot, unless they're right on my lap, unless it's my grandchildren, but she turned around because she could hear this noise that was increasing, and she had the look on her face like, "Who is that child making all that noise?" And then that look didn't leave her face. And not everyone understands that some children are not able to control their behavior the way that a typical child does. So I think that is amazing that even in 1902, and obviously it'd be nice if even in the 1700s people were recognizing that. Although it does say in 1798, so I have to go back one paragraph. This is actually on healthline.com. The symptoms of ADHD were first described in 1798, so barely the 1700s, by a Scottish physician, Sir Alexander Crichton, as the incapacity of attending with a necessary degree of constancy. Just laughing, because think of yourself. Do you have the incapacity? Do you have the capacity of attending with a necessary degree of constancy to sitting still or focusing on something? On any one object. So that's kind of funny. I mean, I find it funny because, yeah, raise my hand here. Okay, so but there wasn't a diagnosis, but this physician recognized these symptoms. And then um, they started playing with medications to see if it would help, which I wouldn't even want to hear about because I think, I mean, I guess sometimes it's scary. It says young patients' behavior and performance in school in 1936 improved when Dr. Charles Bradley stumbled upon some side effects of a medication and found that I guess they had been giving a medication, from what I can understand. This very short paragraph is that he was giving patients medication for something else and saw that they could improve, maybe sit still when they gave it to him. Um, but he ignored his findings. Later, doctors looked back. That medication was called Benzedrine, and, um, and they looked back and thought, "Hey," just like with Ozempic, it's for diabetes, right? But then people recognized it had a side effect of dramatic weight loss, and a lot of people just use it for weight loss. And I haven't really dived deep on learning about that, but it's something talked about quite a bit. So, like I said, I don't read the news much, but you hear things talked about on TV or whatever. Okay, so back to the DSM. The first diagnostical, the DSM book, I'll just call it a book, was issued in 1952, and it listed all the mental um, disorders that they recognized. And then a second one was published in 1968. This is the first one that mentioned hyperactivity. Well, they called it a hyperkinetic reaction of childhood. So, from what I know, kinesiology, so anatomy is, learning about the body, the bones, the muscles, everything, the tissues and stuff. Kinesiology is knowing what happens with the body when it's moving. That's my understanding with learning about yoga. Let me just see if I'm kinesiology um, definition. Oh, I'm so proud of myself because this I just gathered from what I've learned in yoga, but it's a scientific study of human movement, biomechanics, anatomy, physiology, and neuroscience. Anyway, okay. So kinetic movement. So they recognized in the 60s that there were children who couldn't um, manage that that there was a hyperkinetic reaction of childhood. People who were more moving had a lot more movement at Disney World than someone else. And so in 1955, um, okay, so we're backing up because in 1968, they actually put that information in the DSM. But before that, um, they started using Ritalin in 1955. It became popular as a treatment as the disorder became better understood and diagnosis increased. But okay, backing up. Okay, in true fashion, I'm reading the middle of this paragraph before I read the first. Okay, that medication was introduced. It was approved by the FDA, Federal Drug Administration. So this is US stuff in 1955. It wasn't used for children yet then, and still used today, which is interesting. I mean, we know that Ritalin and other stimulants are very, very highly monitored. You have to use your driver's license when you go and pick it up, and you have to see your doctor. At least where I live, you have to see your doctor every 3 months to continue having it prescribed or renewed. But some medications that I took in the 70s for my allergies and asthma and everything, they're over the counter now. Sudafed, Benadryl, all those things. What's the purple one? Dimetapp, all my allergy medicines, even Afrin nose, then just spray, it was a drop then. Different things like that, the eye drops, they were all prescriptions, but Ritalin, still over the counter and highly, highly regulated. So now we're to the third edition of the DSM, DSM-3 in 1980. This is when we're starting to get to terms that we probably heard of because we didn't know about that hyperkinetic reaction of childhood. Unless you did, but you didn't. I didn't know you did. So anyway, so they changed the definition of the hyperkinetic kinetic reaction of childhood to attention deficit disorder, ADD. So 1980. Some of you may have been born in 1980. Some of you, like me, may have been in high school in 1980. And I can tell you, I never ever heard of ADD in high school or college, and I graduated from college. I didn't hear about it till my kids were in school, my younger kids. My youngest son was born in 2002, so I didn't hear about ADD until the 2000s. I did watch the news more then, so I was more in touch with the world. But anyway, so they had a new disorder called attention deficit disorder. And there's a belief, I think, that some people think there's either ADD or ADHD. They'll say things like, "I don't think I have ADHD, but I'm probably ADD," or vice versa. And there was never both. There was ADD with hyperactivity and ADD without hyperactivity. So attention deficit disorder either included, like it was still one diagnosis, and it was either a subtype of having hyperactivity along with it or not having hyperactivity. So that's fascinating to me because even into the 2000s, people were saying, I have ADD or I was diagnosed with ADD. And it's like, were you? I mean, the thing is, I mean, I'm not doubting that they were, but if it's not a diagnosis, maybe you weren't required to go to a medical doctor there. Then there are different kind of clinicians. Is that how you say the name? That you can get a diagnosis from. It's not just a doctor, depending on where you live. And so maybe some didn't know. I don't know. I'm just trying to figure it out as I go along. Okay. 1987. So we go from 1980 when they talk about ADD. 7 years later, there's a revised edition of the DSM-3. So they didn't change it to 4. It's DSM-3. And that was 1987, the year I got married. So they removed the hyperactivity distinction. And instead of saying ADD, they said ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, because it can include all of those. But some symptoms can be more prominent than others. And they said that these 3 symptoms, inattentiveness, impulsivity, and hyperactivity, um, those were the main 3 symptoms. And then in 2000, in the 4th edition of DSM, so DSM-4, so for 13 years, it was just ADHD, and they didn't really specify if you had it in more in one direction or the other or both, meaning more attention deficit, more hyperactivity, and impulsiveness. But in the year 2000, they said there are 3 subtypes of ADHD, and this is what healthcare professionals go by today. Either predominantly inattentive type, so you may have some hyperactive components. You might have a hard time waiting in line or waiting in traffic, or you might have impulsivity problems, but maybe not enough of those symptoms to be diagnosed with a hyperactive impulsive type of ADHD. But you have plenty of symptoms for the inattentive type ADHD. And that would be one of them would be one of the types would be the predominantly inattentive type, or predominantly hyperactive impulsive type would be the second. The third is the combined. And from what I understand, when they're asking you about symptoms, they also want to know if you had them in childhood. What I've seen just in my family is I was diagnosed with both the hyperactivity and the inattentive type, impulsivity, the whole shebang. And I mean, I didn't really know. I didn't look into the different subtypes that much. But the first time I took a sample ADHD test, and it was one that was written that they would give you like at a doctor's office or a psychiatrist or something. And whatever it said, like if you have 9 out of these 12 or 5 out of these whatever, I was like very, very high in all of them. And there are other ways to measure it. But in fact, I should go to my page because I have that information and share it with you. But let me see if this link will come up. Bum, bum, bum. So, yep, here it is. So they're in the cdc.gov website, and I can put this link on my website. For diagnosing ADHD, you need to have 6 or more symptoms of inattentive type or hyperactivity, impulsivity if you are a child up to 16 years, 6 or more symptoms. If you're an adult, you have to have 5 or more symptoms of inattention and or hyperactivity, impulsivity, 17 years and older. And then you also need to have had dealt with it in childhood. I don't know where that is, but I've seen it before. Oh, um, in addition to the above criteria, the following conditions must also be met. Several, that's funny they say several because they say 5 or more. But I mean, if you have like 5 or more on the inattentive part and then 2 on the hyperactivity, you know what I mean? So several of the symptoms were present before you were 12. And several symptoms are present in 2 or more settings. So you don't just deal with it at work. Maybe work is super high stress, but at home, school, around other people, out in public, you don't deal with it. So they want it to be present in 2 or more settings. And then they also want evidence that the symptoms interfere with learning, like in school or work or relationships or home. Um, and It is not a mood disorder, it's not an anxiety disorder, although a lot of people have anxiety along with it, and a lot of women especially are diagnosed as having anxiety disorder when they actually have ADHD and the anxiety comes from the ADHD. It's also not a personality disorder, and it's not a dissociative disorder. So anyway, there's all different kinds. Um, But let me go back to where we are today. So now there's a DSM-5, and that came out in 2013, the original release date, and they did an update in 2022. Did it affect the ADHDers? I don't know. I did see, so because I like to dig deep, when I made my Understanding ADHD quick guide to have on my website, my intention was to say, "Hey, here are the 3 types of ADHD. Here are a list of symptoms and things that you struggle with, things that are common with each kind, and combined means all 3." I actually learned that there are 2 other less common subtypes. One is called other specified presentation, and that means that you have symptoms that are common with ADHD that are disruptive in school, work, home life, relationships, but not enough symptoms to meet the criteria for other kinds of ADHD. And then you don't meet the criteria for another neurodevelopmental disorder because you might have some ADHD symptoms and you have autism. So they're not going to diagnose you as an other specified presentation because you just have some symptoms. There are a lot of people like, there's a lot of people who say stuff like, everyone has a little ADHD, everyone has a little ADD. Oh, we all deal with that. Well, you might deal with some of the symptoms, but not as many and not in the same way. Or they may, and they may not know. I could have been that person, although I never said that to anybody. But I do have friends who told me that they had ADHD and what they took and what made a big difference and all this stuff. Never in my life did I think I had it. I didn't. Yeah. And then the fifth one is unspecified presentation. Um, and this one's kind of funny, but it's what they do. And I don't know, like, how rare it is for someone to get diagnosed with this, with ADHD unspecified presentation. It means you also have symptoms that are disruptive in relationships, work, school, and home life. And it also does not meet the criteria for another neurodevelopmental disorder, which means brain was formed this way when you were born. But the clinician does not specify the criteria, the reasons that the criteria wasn't met. So one is specified, might just depend on the clinician. Maybe the clinician doesn't know. I don't know. Um, but yeah. But let me tell you, okay, for those of you saying, but you still haven't told me, I'm trying to figure out if I have ADHD or not. Well, let me get a drink of water. I'm going to pause for a tiny bit, see if I can do that. I don't know how to do it on here. I'm afraid I'm going to mess it up. I already paused it on the audio, but those of you watching on YouTube, okay, pause. Wow, a miracle just happened. I reached and got my drink and drank it. I didn't knock it over. I didn't spill it on myself, so yay for that. And I didn't somehow knock the microphone and make it so it wasn't working like I did a couple of episodes ago on the YouTube video. But okay, here are some common symptoms. Inattentive ADHD, struggling with organization, decision making. So this comes with executive dysfunction, setting priorities, starting tasks, finishing tasks, paying attention, listening, focus. Oh, I wrote starting tasks in here twice. Oh my goodness, redundancy. Okay, it gives me more space on that page. It was kind of crowded. This is my editing right here in the live for you. Okay, so and then just common things. You're easily distracted, you're forgetful, you lose things often, and you avoid tasks. And it's not that you don't want to do them, it's not that you're procrastinating, you're just not doing them. Something is getting in the way. Hyperactive, hyperactive. Honestly, if I wasn't reading this, I could say it. I need to not try to read something. Okay, the other kind, the hyperactive kind, and also impulsive. Tends to talk more than most. Notice how I didn't say talks too much because who decides? Who decides who talks too much, right? Maybe some people decide. And my doctor's notes with my ADHD diagnosis was any of you heard me say this before? Was hyper, wait, what was the word? It's not hypervocal, hyperverbal. Hyperverb, hyperverbal. Oh my goodness. Okay. So that's like hyperactive. It comes out, with the speech, right? Talks more than most. Let me add thinks more than most. Like we have thoughts come up. So, sometimes we just got to get them out. We need to process them. Has lots of energy, tends to have lots of energy, tends to act without thinking. That's where a lot of the falling, tripping, if you move without thinking, you could run into things. Oh, I say that with I have to take a deep breath when things like that when I talk about things like that. Okay, share lots of details. You like to, explain. You like to connect with people and evaluate in your own mind all those details. Doesn't mean all of you do, but I mean just 5 or more of these symptoms. Interrupt others, blurt out comments, sometimes without thinking, and sometimes thinking about it, but still not being able to contain yourself. I need to just keep circulating my episodes and talk about some of them again because the impulsivity episode was fascinating to me, that there are different types of impulsivity, and one of them is doing something without any thought. One of them is having the thought and not being able to resist it. And the third one, I can't remember, maybe there are 5 actually. So, that's why I need to keep reviewing too. Okay. So, blurting, having a busy mind. So, that's just thoughts galore and getting restless and wiggly or moving, moving a lot. Like, because these things, like if we were to look at a child to observe and say, we wouldn't just say, oh, he has lots of energy. Although adults say stuff like that. But if you were actually watching them, you would say they're moving more than most. And if you are like that as an adult, you might recognize that while everyone else is singing, they're standing still and you are swaying or dancing or moving your arm like you're leading the music or whatever. And so when you can't move, you have a hard time sitting still, you have a hard time waiting, you have a hard time standing in line, you have a hard time not talking. One of my friends told me, excuse me, her she said she was talking to a friend who has ADHD, and she told her, she said, "Oh, my friend Renee has a podcast for women with ADHD." And she said, "Oh, I can't listen to podcasts." And she asked her why, and she said, "Because it's really frustrating that I can't talk too." And I thought, you know what? I kind of get that. I kind of get that. And because especially the part where you wanna share when you have ideas that come up from what somebody's saying to you. In real life, you can respond if it's appropriate. And if they don't think it sounds like you're interrupting them, but, when you chime in, you're like, "Yeah, me too," and then you get to share things with each other. Well, when you listen to a podcast, you can't always do that. I always when I listen to podcasts, I just wanna, like, stop and write to them, and then I think, "Well, I'll do that later," and then I wanna make a list of things I wanna write to them because I wanna connect with them. I rarely do just because I feel like the people that I like, they probably get, DMs and stuff. They don't need me writing to them, but I love to share things. I love to connect. Okay. So then the combined is a combination. So some other common symptoms. So those are things like that you might notice in yourself, but like actual conditions, executive dysfunction, the brain does not function in the same way. I misspelled, wrote function with a Tion instead of a C. I'm so glad I'm editing this live. Okay, executive dysfunction. Yeah, your brain doesn't process things and doesn't keep information in the working memory has problems. So, yeah, it's a big reason for all the things, decision making and all of that. Emotional dysregulation. And that's kind of interesting because in the symptoms, it doesn't really it doesn't really show up in the symptoms. Let me go look at the CDC page again and see if they mention that, because even though emotional dysregulation is a part of it, um, yeah, none of the symptoms that they ask about, I mean, there's a list of them on the CDC website, and I actually have that link at the end of my little guide, and none of them talk about the emotional part, which is so interesting, but it's a huge part. I wonder when they have a DSM-6 if they'll talk about that. Maybe I should write to 'em and ask them to. Like, they're gonna listen to me. Okay, back to the common things. And if you want a list of this, you can just get it on my um, website. There's a spot that you can get this for free. Okay, where am I? Where am I? You know what? Maybe this is an older. I don't know. I saved a bunch of them. I didn't know the date on it. Maybe I've already corrected this, but maybe not. Okay, back to this time blindness. So yeah, the also the diagnosis doesn't really talk about being late. And it's a huge part of ADHD. And I'm not saying that, that I just find I'm not saying that the way they diagnose is wrong. I just think it's really fascinating that you could leave your appointment with a diagnosis, but what they asked you about doesn't really give you the full picture that why do I have a hard time getting ready on time? I thought I was just in here doing my makeup for 10 minutes. And now it's 25 minutes later. Like, what's going on? And so, yeah, that's super fascinating. Okay, time blindness, anxiety. Lots and lots and lots of women diagnosed with anxiety, or they go to get an ADHD diagnosis, ask for one, and they're told you just have a lot of anxiety. That's what happened to my daughter in law. Come to find out after some other tests, she has a very, very high level of ADHD. Sensory sensitivities. I think I spelled that wrong too. What is wrong with me? Sensitivites. Oh, I majored in English. I mean, at least I can find this. I did work as an editor for a while, but sometimes I have found that if I'm editing something of my own, if I just look at it when I make it, I can't, and in the same form, I can't see the mistakes as easily. But if I'm writing an email that's going to go out, if I email it to myself and read it as if I received it, I can find the mistakes easier. Or if I print out a paper back in the old days, like I'd write type of a paper or something, and then when you print it out, I could see it better on the paper. But okay, yeah. So sensory sensitivities are like I'm wearing sweatshirts all the time. It feels really comfortable to wear a sweatshirt, a t-shirt, to have a bra that doesn't like hurt my shoulders. And at the end of the day, it's like it's so nice to not have to wear that and wear comfortable shoes and all that stuff. Rejection, sensitive dysphoria. Another thing that comes along, it's a condition that comes along with ADHD. Even if you don't have the actual condition, you might be more sensitive to rejection or more sensitive to someone else who's a pitcher and he didn't do very well and you feel so bad that he's going home feeling like that. You might have more of those sensitivities and being klutzy, clumsy, all of that. The need in your joints, your arms, your hips to move and change how you're seated and have your knee up high and your arm up high when you lay down. Things that you just don't see other people do. Yeah. Overthinking, analyzing. And I think so even though I don't say, like, talks too much because that's like a criticism, overthinking, like, if I say to somebody else, "You're overthinking that," maybe that's criticism, but that seems to be something that we even recognize in ourselves, like, "I am so overthinking this." I am like that perfectionism. I need to add that to this list. The analyzing, sleeplessness, and that can have to do that's a condition that can happen because of your inability to fall asleep because your brain's going so many, miles an hour. Hyper focus. You finally are focusing, and maybe it's not even on what you want to get done, but you're spending so much time on it and oh, doing little bits that don't even need to be done. And you're super curious. You want to find something out, and you might spend 2 hours looking into it because once you find out one thing, you're going to find out more and find out more and find out more. Obsessive behaviors. Maybe you don't have OCD along with ADHD. Maybe you don't have OCPD along with ADHD, although my psychiatrist said it's more commonly coexistent with ADHD. But you may have obsessive behaviors that aren't enough for a diagnosis, but you notice you have all these obsessive or compulsive ways. Um, yeah, it's fascinating to learn how your brain works and why it does what it does. And maybe you have a diagnosis with ADHD. Maybe you don't. Maybe you want to learn if you have it. Maybe you want to learn but not get diagnosed, and that's fine too. Some people struggle with getting a diagnosis because they wish they had had it earlier. Some people celebrate. Some people do a little bit of each. And you can't really look back. You can't, well, I mean, you can always look back, but you can't really change the past. You can't change the past. I shouldn't say really. You can't change the past. So looking forward, learning about how ADHD affects not only your brain, but your life is helpful because then you can better design systems and support and advocate for yourself so that your life can go better. It's not something you're cured of. It's not something that goes away, but you can certainly make life better and easier for you when you can while it works. So, so I'm gonna go because I have a Zoom yoga in 17 minutes. I actually am remembering today without an alarm, which was kinda like living on the edge for me, but it's not my normal day where I'm coming and going and lots of things are going on since it's Sunday, and I'm in the same room, so I was hoping I would remember. I didn't want my alarm to go off like it has before that says, um, that that interrupts my podcast. So anyway, thank you for listening, thank you for being there, and life is good. It's not always easy. It's not always perfect for sure. A lot of things aren't going well, but we can make our little corner what the best we can within our control. Oh, I actually did set an alarm. Oh my gosh, I guess I don't even know. I don't even know where my phone is. I'm probably sitting on it. Okay, just a second. I have to pause. Yeah, so apparently, since I didn't set my alarm last night, I thought I didn't have one set today. I thought I was living on the edge. Sorry to get that you had to hear my alarm. Whenever you hear someone else's alarm and it sounds just like yours, and then you think, "Is my alarm going off?" But no, it's just mine and not remembering. I mean, maybe I think at the beginning of the week I might have set it up good in one way and not good in another, huh? Because it disrupted the podcast, but I'm sure you're okay. So thank you for being here, and I'll be back when I'm back. I always have plans, and we'll see how they go. But I hope you have a great week. It'll be April before we know it. Birthday time galore in our family. My oldest daughter's birthday's today, and I have a grandson. One of her sons' birthday was yesterday. Another grandson's was last Tuesday. Son-in-law on. Now I'm already losing track. I don't know. His was last week too. I think it was Wednesday. And then I have a daughter's birthday this Wednesday and a son's birthday next Sunday. So I think that's the little marathon. But it's fun. It's a fun marathon. Giving birth with all that going on wasn't as easy. The last one of the 3 of my kids' birthdays that are all in a row, he's born on April 5th, and I did full-fledged parties for the 2 girls, and then I just thought, "What on earth did I just do?" and had a baby 4 days later. So, things you do when you're younger, huh? And you can look back on. But thanks for being here. I know I say that over and over, but I really do appreciate you, and I'll be back.
Help other women find the show. Rate, review, share with someone you know. Help other women find my show. Rate, review, share with someone you know. Hurry before you forget.